Welcome to Transformation with Martine. Martine Emmons is a transformational life coach who broke free from childhood abuse, sexual trauma, and overcame cancer to become a powerful force of healing and hope for others. Martine describes traumatic events as fierce emotional tsunamis. They can leave impending doom and destructive tidal waves of emotions that hit you when you least expect it. Martine helps her clients dive into the depths of their trauma and pain as she stands fiercely advocating for them to shine a light on those experiences and find the lesson in the pain. She serves as a beacon of hope that guides you to see the strength, lessons, and purpose that can be born from the pain. You can feel alive with purpose again when you awaken your dormant strength, step into your power with a sense of peace, and discover a new wave of hope with the right tools and support. Martine and her guests are here shining their lights today through empowering stories of hardship and transformation to inspire you to find hope and to see that there is a beautiful blue ocean of serenity, happiness, and fulfillment in your future. Transformation with Martine starts now.
Welcome everyone to Transformation with Martine. This is where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. And today's going to be a great show. For those of you who are not familiar with me, my show is every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, and my show is about hope. I firmly believe, as well as the guests that come on my show, is that we as humans are resilient and we can get back up from anything. And today I'm really excited. I didn't know if I'd be emotional or if I'd just be excited. And today I'm excited. Today I have two of the most amazing humans in the world to me. Michelle Moore has been my personal coach since, believe it or not, 2017. I can't believe we've been together. It feels like so long, you know? And then Sean Smith, I met him at an event, just happened to sit down at the table, and the woman that was with me was like, "Whew, he's hot." I'm like, "Yeah, he is." And we were both a little uncomfortable. And then he delivers this speech and all this passion and energy. It's like, oh, this program he introduced, I knew I had to be a part of it. And my life has not been the same. So these two wonderful people, I can't recommend enough. I can't say enough. Michelle, I love you like a sister, I love you. And Sean, I love you for even the very first call I had with you, okay, you want to make changes in your life or you don't? And I remember leaving this session, I was so dizzy, I could hardly get out of my chair. It was so powerful. So I thank both of you for all the beautiful guidance and just everything you've done for my life. And thank you for being here today to talk about a topic that, regardless of all the training, all that I've been through and learning from the both of you, it's still really hard for me. And I'm just going to be vulnerable with that, we talk about how sometimes we don't want to say too much because we don't want to reveal too much because that's scary. But I know that for my own clients, for colleagues that we talk about, there is this safety about us, this feeling in our bodies that, as Michelle especially knows, that when I don't feel safe, when I'm scared, when I feel like I've been bad, when I'm afraid that someone's going to come down on me or hurt me, I get this feeling in my hips that it's just this pulsating ball of fear. And as I was telling actually Michelle just yesterday in a session, that there's a person in my life that happens to love to sneak up behind me and it sets me into this place that it takes a long time to come down from. And I feel like in all this time of my life, it shouldn't be so hard, but it is. It's just like jumping up on me, trying to scare me might be fun for you, but it's not for me. Mm-hmm. So maybe we start there.
I think you did.
Yeah.
And I love the tagline of your show. conquer everything, compromise nothing. And I think it's really relevant to what you shared just now. And before, when you were saying, you kind of had this resonance in your body after our first call. And so you've constantly met the moment from my vantage point, the invitations to look within and to heal and to confront whatever is going on internally. And that's just part of the process if we want to evolve as humans and keep removing all the masks and all of that. But it has to be done in a safe way. And we need to be willing to not compromise the way we want to live our lives. And I think it's so easy for us to avoid whatever immediate pain is in our way or conflict. And in doing so, we're compromising something bigger. So this safety topic, I think, is obviously it's critical to all of us. So that's why we're here talking about it. There's a concept in neurolinguistic programming. I'm forgetting the word right now. I haven't used it in a long time or even talked about it, that any change needs to be safe. It needs to be safe for us and for everybody around us. Because if any change is not safe, we will sabotage it. And that safety, the more important one is internal safety. And if we don't feel safe internally, then there is no safety externally, because your body is dangerous. And so even if you take your dangerous body and put it in a really safe room, your experience of the world is still dangerous, because the safety, or in this case, the danger is inside your body. But then the flip side of that is also true for the most part. When you are the safe space, then you can even be in a dangerous room and still be okay. And that doesn't mean you don't pay attention to your surroundings or to people or whatever, but you're actually in a much better place to discern the danger externally when you have safety internally. And that's a vague, high-level concept that has all kinds of various details that are going to apply to each one of us individually. But I think we first have to understand what's at stake here. And what most people are doing is spending the majority of their lives trying to make their surroundings safe.
Yes.
And they never look at their body and their internal experience of safety, whether it's mentally, the thoughts in our head, emotionally, our triggers, like you just mentioned, somebody, surprising you from behind. And it might take a while for us to even recognize that safety is an internal game and trust is an internal game. But then we realize it's mostly the whole game once we get to that point. So I've seen you on that journey, Martine, and I really honor you for it. And I know that's a huge piece of Michelle's journey and coaching as well.
Thank you. Yes. Yes. What came to me when I was listening to you speak, Sean, right, about being in a dangerous room, right, is that, or being in a safe room, is that even if we're in a safe space, if my body is not a safe space, I still won't be able to relax, right? I'm still going to I have to be on guard, because inside of my system, there's warning bells, right? Alarms that are going off that are telling me that it's not, I'm not going to be okay. It's dangerous to relax. It's dangerous to be in the present moment. It's dangerous to be in my body. And yeah, I think probably all of us are, to some degree, we're programmed, right? We're conditioned to seek that safety outside of ourselves, because when we were little, our environment, whether it was our parents, our caretakers, when we were small children, they were our source of safety.
And for anybody that has had like relational or, just developmental like trauma where their, emotional needs weren't met, or there was neglect or abuse, things like that, then we don't have even anything to gauge our safety up against. So we don't even know how to begin to go about that internal cultivation of safety. We only know how to be able to get it from outside of ourselves, which leads to, us trying to control our environments and like manipulate experiences or people so that everything can be just so, and we tell ourselves that we'll be able to rest in that moment. But in my experience, that moment never came.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What comes to my mind with what you just said is, I remember my dad, hurting me and my mom coming up afterwards and trying to hug me. And I would just be stiff as I don't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
You didn't stop it from happening to me. And my mom was really one of these just the warmest huggers, but I didn't want any of that after what had happened otherwise. So, yeah.
That speaks to the power of association. Our brains at a deep unconscious level, they operate more on association than cause and effect. So our logical mind will say, well, my mom wanting to give me a hug didn't cause the pain that I'm feeling from what somebody else did. But the brain said, I'm in pain, mom tries to hug me, and it creates that association. And so many of us have associations, and the majority of them, almost 100% of them are not conscious to us because the brain is constantly making associations at an unconscious level. And so we quite often, I would say in the common terminology in the personal development world, we call those triggers. Something happens, it triggers a response in us. It triggers a fear response or a flight response or a fight response or a freeze response in the whole world of trauma. It triggers anger. It triggers behavior sometimes, right? Somebody will cut us off in traffic and then we immediately give them the finger, honk on the horn, speed up, huff and puff, whatever. And those are all because of associations that we have. And one of the things that doesn't work is for us to think that we have the ability to overpower our associations. We're not going to out-motivate our unconscious associations. We're not going to out-logic our associations. We have to be aware of them and then use them or change them or embrace them or something, right? But we first have to recognize these are the associations that this human body has. And it doesn't matter that we shouldn't have them. It doesn't matter that we wished we didn't. It doesn't matter. We all wish that our childhoods were better. Every single one of us. We wish our childhoods were better for whatever the reasons were. But that doesn't change the associations. It doesn't matter that we're 30 years old, 40 years old, 80 years old, that we've been doing this work for 2 years, 20 years. None of that matters. We either have the associations or we don't. And when we have associations like that at a deep level that are affecting our lives in ways that we don't want them to affect our lives, such as potentially having a negative association to hugging, or potentially, people surprising you. And I'm just using those examples that you've shared. Sure. If we don't want to operate with those associations, then we have to confront them. And the good news is I don't personally ever remember in my 18-ish years of doing any version of this work, I don't remember any associations that couldn't be broken.
That's good.
So there's hope there, and you mentioned the word hope early on.
Yeah.
Because the associations at one point in time didn't exist, and then they did.
Right.
So if there was an origin to an association, meaning there was a moment in time that our brain created an association, then that means there was a moment before.
Right.
And I just operate on the belief that if something started, then something can end. If we learned something, then we can unlearn that. And if we don't believe that first, then we won't do the work, or we won't stay in it when it gets uncomfortable.
Yeah. What's present to me is that what we end up trying to do is we are trying to manage the automatic system that's happening, like our body's automated response to those associations. So we don't like that we flick the driver off. We don't like that our body shut down. We don't like that we don't like to be scared. We don't like that physical reaction. So we end up trying to manage those things versus recognizing, Shonda, what you were saying, that there is an association. And that association is almost like the domino, right? That we flick that domino and then it knocks over the other systems in our body that are actually designed and there for a purpose to actually keep us safe and keep us aware of the, dangers in our surroundings. It's just when we're in a place where we're experiencing danger that's actually not in this present moment with us because of the associations, or at least in part.
I know we got to take a break, so we'll pick it up after this, but there's an element of judgment there and safety that I want to explore that I think is really important.
Perfect. We'll be right back, everyone. See you in a few. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine, where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. My guests today are Sean Smith and Michelle Moore, and we are talking about safety in the body. So, Sean, why don't you lead this next session here?
Yeah, and I just want to close the loop. I said earlier there was a phrase in NLP, and it's called ecology. And I don't use that word very often, and I think it's because when I learned it, it just didn't make immediate sense to me. But the concept is that our goals and our dreams need to be ecological. They need to be ecologically safe. They need to be safe for us and safe for everything around us. And if there's not alignment in the safety like that, then we're just going to sabotage ourselves. We're going to resist. So what Michelle was talking about just before the break, I think leads to a really important conversation and awareness around the judging that we do. When we have these associations and then we judge them, we shouldn't have them. This should be easier. I should have gotten over this, whatever. The act of judging is itself unsafe. And so now, because it's a form of punishment, so now when we recognize what's going on in our bodies that we didn't have control over, when we recognize them and then judge them, now we're taking associations that may or may not have lack of safety in them, and then we're putting lack of safety on them. And while we're in that space of self-judgment, we cannot learn. We cannot grow. We're not going to be able to learn the lessons that our experiences, whether current experiences or past experiences, have for us. We're not going to learn the lessons from our pain, from our trauma, from any of the things that are here to teach us. We cannot learn and judge at the same time. Because while we're judging, we're also protecting. We're protecting from further pain, or we're protecting from what we don't want to look at internally. We're protecting ourselves from ourselves. And we can't be protecting ourselves and punishing ourselves and learning and growing at the same time. So I think a lot of us don't really fully understand how damaging and how amazingly destructive self-judgment is. Now, it's not something that we can just go, oh, I heard on a podcast this one time that we shouldn't judge ourselves. So let me just find the switch on that one and go, boop, okay, now we no longer judge ourselves. But we first have to understand what's at stake and the bigness of the issue for us to then confront it. And it'll take a while. It's going to take a long time. Relative, speaking, it's not going to be the flip of a switch, but we have to understand how important it is to do it. So that self-judgment and self-punishment piece is what will stop almost everybody. because what needs to be done cannot be done in the danger of self-punishment.
Yes. What's helped me with this, and I'm so glad that you brought attention to this, is that so think about it in terms of relationships, right? So if you imagine that there's somebody in your life that when you show up in their presence, they yell at you, they judge how you look, how you're speaking, the way in which you are expressing yourself. They call you names. They tell you that you shouldn't be here, especially looking like that or in the way that you are. Like those things, I mean, even just saying that, I can feel my physical body starting to like shrink in because it doesn't feel safe, right? I'm not welcomed in that relationship as I am, right? And so when we're looking at these patterns and we have this judgment, which by the way is totally normal, I believe, I mean, I know I've done it, and every client that I've worked with in this, it's I think it's part of the process, is we are ending up making our physical, like our environment, our body, right? The environment that we live in, the ecology that we live in, we're actually making it a dangerous place for the things that are completely out of our control to be tended to, right? Like they're showing up because they want attention, and then we're creating this unconsciously, but we're creating this dangerous environment for them. And it's one of the most powerful things that we can do is just become aware of it. That's not the only step, but recognizing that that's what we're doing and that we are in a relationship, and it's going to take the time that it takes for us to really cultivate safety and trust inside of that relationship.
Oh man, I just think about, gosh, I look back and thinking about how abusive I was to myself. Here I grew up in a very abusive environment, and it's so sad to think of how horrible I treated myself for most of my life.
Yeah.
Man, it's sad.
Mm-hmm.
I would never have done that to anybody else.
I know, right? Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a learned behavior. So you growing up in a very abusive home, and everybody grew up in a very abusive home according to their experiences.
Right.
So it doesn't matter that we compare details of how your childhood was compared to my childhood. I didn't grow up with any of the details that I know about either of you in terms of my relationship with my parents. But I was brutally hard on myself still. I got there different ways than you guys got there, right? But just brutally hard on myself. And it just means that we're all pretty good learners. And when the external world punishes us, then we learn to punish ourselves. And a lot of times we do that in a form of self-protection, because if I can punish me first, then you don't have to, or you won't get to.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And that is like, I feel my body activated to that statement. I don't know that I've said that as it relates to myself, at least. So self-punishment, like this is where it gets crazy, right? Self-punishment in the form of self-protection. So we're simultaneously punishing and protecting.
Yeah.
The same thing, ourselves, right? And that's why it can be really confusing. But we have to understand that the self-punishment is actually coming from a place of protection, because we all want to protect ourselves. There is no natural desire to punish ourselves. That's a learned behavior, and then it can become a learned desire to where we actually want to. But our natural being is self-protection. There is nobody that doesn't want to be safe. So we need to understand that underneath the self-punishment is actually self-protection, because then we'll change the way that we see it and then be more gentle. hopefully be more kind. And if you engage somebody or something in conversation that's trying to protect you, you'll talk to them differently than engaging somebody that's trying to only hurt you. We'll just talk differently, and we'll have a different outcome of that conversation. And we need to make that change with ourselves.
Oh, I feel that one. You know, that feeling of like, yeah, you're going to do it before someone else hurts you, and that I must be bad. I have felt that so many times. Like, I must be bad if someone is coming at me like this. So I don't deserve anything good. So I'll just stay over here somewhere and try to stay safe. And yeah, this. Ooh, I feel everything right now. Yeah, I am. So you have this awareness of what you're doing. What's next?
Well, I just want to go back to you feeling everything.
Yeah.
You know, I was looking at Michelle on the screen, and she just like, let's just sit in this for a moment.
That's the answer to the
right.
question.
Yeah. Instead of asking what's next, ask what's now. And what's now is feeling it. And we don't want to feel it. So that's why we want to go to what's next.
How do I fix it?
I know.
How do I fix it?
Oh man, I know.
My favorite thing that my therapist asked me that I was originally irritated by, but eventually I saw the profound beauty in it, is she didn't ask me how I'm feeling. She asked me, am I feeling?
Oh. Yeah. So
when she or anybody else would ask me how I'm feeling, you know, we just have canned responses to that.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm okay. I'm fine. You know, or maybe something's not good, but are you feeling? That is a different room of the house.
Yeah. And to think how like you didn't want that question, and had a therapy session that my therapist is like, he's looking like, so, ooh, if looks could kill right now. See you next week or not. Yep.
Yes. So can we get to the place where we value the experience of feeling before we try to change it?
Right. Absolutely. We're going to take a break in a moment. Before we do, I want to ask, just for the audience, more so, I know your answer, but is it harder for you as a man, do you think, than your female clients?
I mean, I've never been a female, so I can only guess based on conversations. But from what I've seen and talking, yes, because it's not socially okay. And I'm happy to dive deeper into that if you want.
Yeah, because I know we got to go. I'm just thinking, I think the generations, starting with our sons, perhaps on up, it's getting better now with that. I think.
Hopefully.
I hope so too. We'll be right back, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone, to the place where we conquer everything and compromise nothing. We've been talking about safety in the body, and we left off talking about how it is harder for men to express their feelings. It's not acceptable in society as it is for women as much. But at least I've seen in my son, some of his friends, I've seen in people probably up to, 17 here, up to like 28 or so, that it seems to be a little more acceptable now. What do you guys think?
Well, I'd like to briefly speak to the not safety of being emotional or vulnerable as a man. I think the primary reason that we're afraid of virtually anything, but being unsafe or showing our vulnerability or being transparent, the primary reason I believe is that we'll be dismissed, that we'll be abandoned, right? I think that's the core human fear. And so I think with women, again, just my observation, and I'm not trying to be, sexist or anything like that. And not just observation, but discussion with women, when there is an emotional eruption, tears, vulnerability, I think women tend to immediately nurture each other. And I think, because I think that's the nature of feminine energy. I think with men, if we start crying, if we get super vulnerable, our manhood groups, we don't nurture, we dismiss or abandon. At least that's the immediate response a lot of times. And that's in the cultural belief systems. And so we don't want anybody to know that we're weak, that we are afraid, that we have any vulnerabilities. So there's an added pressure of the social aspect of what happens if I tell people. And that's one of the reasons why I think that when men get so tightly wound up with suppression and depression and anxiety and all of that sort of stuff, there's this feeling that I think is a little bit more intense. And again, I'm not trying to be dismissive at all of anybody. But there's an intensity that then starts to feed off of itself, and also then gets into our identity. Because as a man, we have to, according to our programming, be productive. We have to be powerful. We have to be potent, right? Which is why impotent, whether we're talking about sexual or any other way, impotence is maybe the worst thing that a man can feel, meaning I'm not able to do something, right? And because then we lose our sense of meaning. If I'm not potent, if I'm not powerful, if I'm not productive, if I can't perform, then I lose my sense of meaning as a man. And I've been told that by men. So now, and also those men also have told me that women don't want a weak man. So now I have no team. I have nobody that's going to protect me. My own team, so to speak, will dismiss me, and the other team will dismiss me. So I might as well just dismiss myself. And that's what happens a lot of times, I think, in a very, very simplistic way, when men get to that point where they become suicidal or just extremely depressed. And I just don't think the same details are at play in the feminine energy, but also the feminine culture, with how women primarily take care of each other, that nurturing aspect. I think that's what's missing in masculinity, right? That's been my experience. And I think you asked another question. Oh, you said it's like getting better. Is it getting better?
It seems like it in some ways.
Yeah. So
Maybe.
My take on it is that it's simultaneously getting worse and better. I think the way it's getting worse is because social media has brought the world to our insecurities. I read something recently, and it was just fascinating to me, mind-blowing, that up until about 30 years ago, if you were insecure about yourself, which virtually every human is, you only had to worry about like a few dozen people, right? And you go to school, if you had a big school, then you don't have to worry about a few hundred people actually seeing you. And throughout the course of our lives, we don't interact with a whole lot of people, and they don't interact back with us, right? So over the course of human civilization, up until 30 years ago, when the internet came on board, we didn't have access to the entire world and they didn't have access to us. Whereas nowadays you post something on the internet and you literally are putting yourself on the world stage. And now that insecurity that's afraid of a few people seeing us is now afraid of a few million people seeing us.
Right.
Even if that's not reality, that's perception. And so I believe that our younger generations are growing up with a lot more anxiety about being seen. But the flip side to that is, because that's more of a problem, you know, access goes both ways. And Michelle, you mentioned access on the break that I think is important to talk to. We also have access to this conversation in a way that 30 years ago, nobody had access to unless they were in therapy or unless they were in circles of people that were talking about this. So now it's more common language to talk about trauma, to talk about triggers, to talk about therapy, you know, to talk about mental health primarily. Whereas I think 30 years ago and beyond, mental health wasn't being talked about hardly anywhere. So now I think that access on social media and the internet has increased both sides of this. It's increased the anxiety, but it's also increased the conversation. And hopefully that causes people, even if it's quiet at the start, causes people to start paying attention, watching YouTube videos of people that are talking about mental health or podcasts. And so I think they've both risen, the good and the bad of it.
Right. You know, what popped in my head, and it's all kind of intertwined with all this, was I saw a picture of, this woman put out this picture, a series of things about our bodies. And one of them was, and I can't believe this, that 80% of children under 10 are worried about being fat. And I know that for me, it was because I was told I was. And I look at pictures and I don't see it now. Like, I'm not even sure why that came about, but so that was why I felt that way, and it led to eating disorders and everything. But so I guess it is social media that is telling everybody, not just things happening in the home like me. I mean, it's social media and the perfection of how we're all supposed to be. And how can you feel safe or even love your body if all this stuff helps?
Yeah, it's almost impossible. Instagram has destroyed teenage self-esteem. And I've seen that with like a lot of actual studies. Michelle, I know you mentioned something about access and labeling that I think is really important to put in the conversation too.
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things. One, when you were speaking about the man and woman, I also really want to highlight, and you use these words as well, is masculine and feminine. Because I mean, of course, I only know my personal lived experiences. So to compare that, I don't have an answer for that. But I think for the masculine, 100%, it is more challenging. And inside of the conversation of, is it getting better? Right. I agree that yes, in a lot of ways it is. And also what I'm seeing is that a lot of the ways that we are talking about it is similar. And I did and still can do the same thing that you did, Martine, a few moments ago, of just like, okay, so what do? We want to jump to the label. So a lot of the conversations that are out there are label centric, right? And that's not to be dismissive of anybody who has, because I mean, statistics will absolutely tell you there's increases in anxiety and in depression and ADHD. And there's all of these diagnoses that now, because of the internet, we have access to, so we can self-diagnose. And that's actually really comforting for a system who doesn't want to feel, because they don't feel safe to do so. So if I can just be told by somebody else, this is why I am who I am, this is what the problem is, then it's more seemingly comforting for me to have that answer than for me to sit with the sensations in my body, stay present with the grief, with the sadness, with the pain. It's easier for me to talk about it, say, yes, me too, in terms of anxiety, and also just jump to that label, which I do think can be dangerous if we're not also exploring the experience, the physical experience inside of the body.
Yes.
So as you were just talking, I am present to the distinction between comfort and safety.
That should be discussed a bit more.
Just sit with that. You're right.
Let's sit with that. So why don't all of you out there sit with that, and we'll come back and talk about it. Before we do, real quick though, where can everybody find the two of you? And Sean, I think you should mention your book.
Yeah, my address is 4271. Oh, not that. Everywhere online, I am Coach Sean Smith. That's my website. That's my handle across pretty much all the platforms. And yeah, my book, we just officially released it a couple days ago. It's called Daddy, Are You Proud of Me? It's based on the father-daughter relationship and all the experiences that I had coaching women at a deep level for all these years. And virtually every conversation ended up talking about self-esteem. And as we explored self-esteem, it always 100% of the time started with their father. And that doesn't mean that it has to be a bad relationship in order to have low self-esteem, but it always starts with the relationship with their father. And so, and I have a daughter, she was my first child. And so it just changed the way I look at the father-daughter relationship and what we need to understand as men. And I just found myself saying, somebody needs to write a book for men, telling them what they need to say to their daughters and what we can't say and all that stuff. And finally a woman said, you need to write that book. And so I did. And we just published it recently, or just released it recently.
Awesome.
Nice.
So Michelle, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, I'm Coach Michelle Moore everywhere. That's my website, Instagram, Facebook. Same, like Sean said, pretty much on all the social media platforms. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. We'll be right back, everyone. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, to Transformation with Martine. We have been talking about safety in the body, and we have had a most magnificent conversation. For those of you who are listening live, thank you for joining us. And on replay, thank you so much as well for listening and tuning in. So we were talking about awareness of when we are feeling unsafe, when we are feeling our feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to sit in this. And we know at least we as coaches, we know we need to sit in this. And this is what we talk to our clients about. That's how we learn. What is next? We have this awareness. What do we do after that? We feel, and then what? What comes next?
Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah. So I first want to just acknowledge that this is a massive conversation, right? With a ton of nuances. And I think for most people, it's a concept that we sort of start to understand intellectually, but it doesn't land in our body until it does, right? And so that journey, right, of that process, it just will take the time that it takes. And so for me, it was something that I understood, like I got it, like, right. But it wasn't anything that I really fully started to experience and let land in my system until this year. And so I want to answer that question, but I want to say again what I said earlier, which is this is about a relationship with yourself. This are you and all of you, right? Safe with you. And for me, that also, and I believe this is true for all of us, includes the parts of ourselves that we don't like, that we have shame around, that we're embarrassed about, right? Is it safe for them as well? And that process is a process. And so one of the first things that I did was actually just started to look at what that word meant to me. So what did safe mean to me? And I started to look at how did I, because I was so used to, and a lot of us that don't feel that sense of internal safety have this in common. So most of us are programmed to think about relationships outside of ourselves. So start there. Think about relationships that are in your life right now, where you do have, even if it's not all the time, moments where you feel safe. You feel safe to show up as you are. You feel safe to express yourself as you are. And then I asked myself, well, what is it about my relationship with this person? What is it that they do that makes me feel safe? Right. So I started, because I was used to outside myself, I went there first. What do they do that makes me feel safe? And so for me, what came up was that I just felt accepted. Like I felt like I could just be who I was, right, in their presence. I felt seen. I felt like they created like a container that held me, right? That was almost like I could let go a little bit, right? Of the holding on, the clenching that I was doing so much. I could loosen my grip a little because I felt like they were holding me. And the biggest thing is that those people gave me their presence and attention. Now, I'm not saying that those will be the same thing for anybody that's listening, but once I realized that those were the elements, I started to see that that is an opportunity for me to start to show up for myself in those same ways. From there, I started to explore, because feeling wasn't safe for me initially. So that wasn't my first step. Right. And so it might not be yours either, depending on the depth of trauma or the lack of safety that you do feel in your body. But I started to explore the sensations that were present in those moments, right, of acceptance, of like reciprocation and harmony, of being seen. I just started to notice. And it was easier for me at first to notice that I wasn't like gripping, or I wasn't clenching, or I wasn't protecting, I wasn't fighting. It was easier for me to notice what wasn't there.
And you're talking literally. I want to really highlight
Yes.
that, like literally clenching the teeth, clenching.
Yeah.
This isn't just metaphor.
No, I was literally, I would claw, like physically, I would like dig like claw at my skin, dig my hands into my skin. My legs were tight, my back, like everything was in this like locked down. Yes, Sean, thank you for saying that, literal clenching. And so for me, starting to explore the sensations that came in the safety. And when I say sensations, I specifically mean like, that feels tight. My hip feels tingly, right? I feel cold, right? Or tender, or I don't feel anything, right? Numb, or I feel hot, right? Instead of going to the label, what is it that I'm feeling that's triggering me to create that label, right? If I say anxiety, I'm feeling something that's causing me to create the label anxiety. Can I get to the feeling? And that part took time. It started with just like 15 seconds. Could I just check in and notice? And then I couldn't hold the feeling any longer than that. And then I tried it again the next day. Can I notice what's actually happening in my body? And I also started with sections of my body, meaning my legs, my jaw, my chest, my belly, because my whole body felt entirely it was just too overwhelming. And so those steps for me, and I think for anybody that is listening, could be a really powerful and valuable place to start. And then my invitation and encouragement is to get support in your journey with this, because it is very helpful when we don't feel safe to be able to have another person with whom we do, to help us start to like kind of regulate our systems and practice these things in a container where we do feel held.
Yeah. What I would add to that is what's at stake is control to a large degree. So Michelle looking at her leg and going, is this leg tight? That's a sense of control. And one of the reasons we're afraid of our feelings, and probably the root essence of anxiety, is being out of control. So when we feel out of control, we got to find control, find something that we can lean on, like either literally, physically, or just metaphorically. What can you control in this moment? What can you count on in this moment? Because when we're out of control and we're unsafe, we're going to desperately crave control and safety. And sometimes that can just literally look like, that's a table, that's a light, my fist isn't clenched, my name is Sean. Like sometimes we just got to grasp at anything that can give us a sense of that.
I just recently learned that partially from Michelle and partially from another colleague, of just calling out different things in the room to calm down, or just colors, pointing out, well, okay, there's pink over there and there's another thing of pink, and oh, there's a lighthouse there. Just anything to just calm down.
Regaining control.
In this moment, right? You're
Right.
bringing your body back into this moment where the association, right, that we were talking about earlier, has the body reacting likely to something in the past.
Right, right. Oh man, I just want to keep going. I have so many things I want to say, do, go into, and we can't. So how about another show, you two, soon? We need
As long as it's safe.
Yes, when it's safe, we'll do another show. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Sean and Michelle, and thank you so much, all of you, for listening. And please tune in next week, next Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. See y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to Transformation with Martine. Did listening today spark a sense of hope and possibility? Hold on to this feeling and tune in every second and fourth Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific for more inspiring conversations with Martine and her guests. They will show you there is hope, and you are right where you need to be. Martine is dedicated to supporting you right where you are while launching you towards promise, passion, and possibility that leads to the fulfilled life your heart aches for. If you're tired of being stuck, schedule a complimentary consultation with Martine and get on the exciting path towards the life you want to be living. Visit martineemmons.com and make your appointment today.